everybody, and welcome back to Greenosity. And you could probably tell by the title, thumbnail, and the video that's playing in the background that today we're talking about Five Nights at Freddy's because, surprisingly, Five Nights at Freddy's won against Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So today's question and choice in the group chat will be Sonic 3 and Knuckles versus Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And anyways, let's get to the video. Why does FNAF 1 still hold up? Well, honestly, a lot of reasons. Well, for the lore and it being open-ended, and the gameplay loop is just good. If you don't know the backstory of this game, it's basically comes off of another game. Anyways, Scott Cawthon, after making his Christian lineup of games, decided to make Chip and Sons. We all know the story that Chip and Sons flopped, even though I've heard in recent years that Chip and Sons is actually pretty good, but it flopped. And one of the bad reviews was that the characters look very animatronic-y and scary. Scott took the bad review and turned it into a game. This game being called Five Nights at Freddy's. Hello, I just said the title. Now this scary bear game, Five Nights at Freddy's, is very, very deceiving. The story of the game is basically that you work the night shift at your local Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This is probably in Utah because, well, the books are set in Utah. And, well, it just gives Utah vibes. But, anyways, the lore is you take a night shift at your local Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and thinking that it would be, well, a normal night shift, but it turns out the robots are haunted, and they want you dead because you look like the purple guy. And, well, the purple guy didn't exist. For the rest of the video, kind of, we'll be talking about FNAF 1 mainly. After all, this is a Five Nights at Freddy's 1 video. But, basically, the story, as it goes, is that you play through the week. Why would you want to stay? Then you get an overtime. Why would you want to stay? And then you play the custom night. Why would you want to stay? But anyways, let's get to the precursor of the story. So this game is filled with itty bits of lore. So for like example, this game has to take place in 1993. Why? We have multiple variables saying that it takes place in 1993. Well, mainly just not just this game, but other sources. So, if you don't get what I'm saying, on the night one phone call, phone guy, because yes, there are 5 phone calls for Five Nights 1. But only 4 of them are from phone guy. But anyways, the first phone call you get from phone guy basically states, one of the lines is, "Oh, if I hadn't gotten a bath for 20 years, and I had to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years, I'd be pretty irritable at night too." But people like to analyze it a little too hard. They don't like to do what Mr. Hippo says in Ultimate Custom Night about not overanalyzing every detail. The way that the line is delivered, and I can obviously tell I'm an acting student, and I know how to voice act, and I know how to direct people, but the line delivery, it's a joke. Most of what Phone Guy says in this game are jokey, because it's supposed to be one of your only ways that you get comedy out of the game, because it's the only human contact. But it's a joke, guys. The 20 years line is a joke. You need to look at the full context surrounding that line to be able to understand. And what makes it seem like a joke? Well, not just by the delivery, but also the fact that it can't take later. You can make an argument that it could take earlier, but you can't make an argument really on why it takes place later. As we know, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 takes place 30 years after Five Nights at Freddy's 1 from what it says on the Steam page. And you may be like, oh, well, what does Five Nights at Freddy's 3 have to do with FNAF 1 taking place in 1993. It could be either or. Well, for that we have to move to Five Nights at Pizzeria soon. by getting the insanity ending and turning it off the monitor and returning it back on, rebooting it, after getting the requirements for that, it will turn the monitor back on into blueprint mode, and it will, showcase the whole thing that you get locked away in for the insanity ending for in FNAF 6. However, upon booting up, what is the name that shows up? What is the static text? Well, what it is I believe, HRY223, which stands for Henry 2023, which means Five Nights at Freddy's 6 has to take place during, 2023. Can't take place later because it's Henry 2023. And FNAF 3 can't take place later than 2023, considering that FNAF 6 is in 2023, and we know that Springtrap, freaking dies in a fire in 2023. But if you wanted to make an argument that FNAF 1 takes place earlier, that could work, I guess. Which would mean, 1988 could work, because that would mean FNAF 3 would be shifted to, 2018. And it would still work, because Pizza Sim is 2023. So, but the thing is, I don't like, certain people, and me including, don't like that it would be right, the year after the Bite of 87. Which, just doesn't make sense. Me and a lot of people have accepted that what Scott said, that we've already solved the game, and that, it takes place in 1993. Concerning the bite, a lot of people like to say in the week before that there's evidence that Foxy did the bite, because it says Foxy never bit any children. One, let me remind you, the books aren't canon to the games. But here's the difference, they help us solve some things with the games. We got Henry and William from the books. But they're not canon. The books aren't canon. Not all the way, at least. And it just doesn't make sense for Foxy to cause the Bite of 87, considering he's in the parts and service room. He's literally a withered animatronic deactivated during the day. Why would he be the person or the animatronic thing to cause the Bite of 87? The only thing that makes sense, and the only one that I could really see committing the Bite of 87, is Mangle, considering that even though Mangle is broken and taken apart, she's still out in the open. Foxy is in parts and service room, so it doesn't make sense. And as for the other part of the story, about the 5 murdered children, missing children, being stuffed into the suits, because yes, there are 5, Freddy, Bonnie, Chico, Foxy, and the infamous Golden Freddy. Everyone likes to say that the retcon was Dream Theory, when Dream Theory was never canon. And what I'm saying and talking about the retcon is, Scott made a post called the retcon issue on Reddit, which stated that he only ever did one retcon. And the retcon post was before Five Nights at Freddy's 6 Pizza Sim, which means that the retcon was before Pizza Sim. He also stated in his post that it was a big retcon, but it was a seamless transition to where nobody noticed and not a confusion point. So, it takes place before Five Nights 6. It was a big point, but it had a seamless transition, and nobody noticed. What is it? I believe it takes place in Five Nights 1. Because if it was Dream Theory, people would have noticed. Dream Theory isn't canon, y'all. Stop acting like Dream Theory was originally the thing. Dream Theory was never canon, and never the thing. In fact, the retcon, what I believe is the retcon, is literally just, that the murderer got charged and arrested and convicted. Because if you see in the newspapers in FNAF 1, it says suspect charged, convicted, but they couldn't find the bodies in one of the newspapers. But we know that can't be true, since William Afton's still roaming around enough to get spring locked and to murder, the MCI children, so the first 5, the DCI children, which are the second 5, and Charlie, which Charlie happens before the MCI, but whatever. And a lot of people tend to forget that the DCI kids even exist, which we'll cover them when we get to our FNAF 2 video. But anyways, let's talk about the whole gameplay shtick. So you're given camera, doors, and lights, and well, when you press the button that's labeled the door, what do you think is gonna happen? It either opens or closes the door. We're back to preschool, right? And it's the same with the light. You press the lights, light comes on or off. Flip open the camera, camera happens. Blah blah blah. Anyways, but they all waste power. I don't remember how much that they waste, but I know that power, if you're idle, it wastes. And I know that it's every 3 seconds, 1% is gone for if you're idle. Anyways, if we're going to be talking about the gameplay, well then let's talk about how many animatronics and which animatronics. So Bonnie and Chica are introduced on night 1, Fox is introduced in night 2, Freddy's introduced in night 3, and then night 4 and night 5 are just harder versions of night 3. So if you want to be for real, let's talk about how the animatronics work. So basically, the animatronics work like this. They have AI values. And because I'm a game developer and I've coded many FNAF fan games, and especially having to code Mike Intruders 2 within like a couple of months ago, I had my mind refreshed on how they work. But you have AI values that can be from 1 to 20. And then you have a random number from 1 to 20. And you put it for like an amount of time. So like, for example, in Click Team Fusion, you'd put every 3 seconds that you check the AI value and compare it to the random number. So for example, if my AI value was 5 and my random number was 3, then Bonnie or Chica succeeds their movement opportunity and moves on. However, if it's greater than 5, or their AI number, then they fail. That's why in 420 mode, they have 100% guaranteed to succeed. And that's why some nights they can stay longer at your door for what it feels like eternity. That's why Bonnie can hog the door. But anyways, Bonnie works like this. I mean, yeah, but he uses the basic of movement opportunities. But basically, he moves from the east side of the, the west side of the building. The only difference is he doesn't have a set path. He can literally teleport. He does not conform to the laws of time, space, and physics. He can literally float in the FNAF 1 trailer. That being said, he can literally teleport. He doesn't have a specific path. It just has to stay on, the west side of the building. So, for example, one of his paths could be, he moves straight from the stage to the backstage to the dining area to either the hallway, the west hall corner, or the supply closet. Sometimes you can move straight from the backstage straight to your blind spot. And Chica has a straight path. Basically, unlike Bonnie, Chica actually moves a path. So, stage, dining area, bathroom, kitchen, and when she's in the kitchen, since the camera's disabled, you can hear pots and pans. East hall corner, then door. Or she can do East hall, door, then East hall corner. Foxy works a little bit differently. He's the one that works the most different. So basically, he still does the movement opportunities, but he has a timer, and he has phases. Every time the timer goes down, which basically the only way to stop the timer go down and to reset it is to look into cameras. You don't have to look at Pirate's Cove specifically. You can look at any camera, which helps on the later nights. So basically, anytime you look at the cameras, it resets his timer. But when his timer reaches 0, his AI value and his movement on, but the AI values and the random number compares each other. Once again, like Bonnie Chica, if it's lower, he succeeds. If it's greater, he fails. So, if it's lower, he'll succeed to his next phase, but if it's greater, he will fail and stay at the phase. He has, I believe, 4 phases, which is not peeking, about to run, and running. And basically, once he gets to running, there are 2 separate things you can do. You can either not look, which will generate a random amount of time from him to get to your door, which I recommend to not do on later nights because you don't want to be randomly guessing on later nights when he's coming, when you have to conserve a lot more power. So to combat with this, you can literally look at the hallway and he'll start running. It completely bypasses the whole, oh, you need to be randomly guessing, as he's already running. Anyways, on to Freddy. Freddy moves like a mix of Chica and like a mix of Foxy. So he's on the east corner of the building like Chica, and he moves exactly like Chica. Stage, dining area, bathroom, kitchen, which when he's in the kitchen, you'll hear his Toreador march. East Hall corner. He'll never go to a blind spot. This is how he works. Basically, he has a timer, and just like Foxy, as long as you're looking at him, and I mean looking at his camera, the camera does not have to be up. The camera view just has to be on Freddy. Then it will pause his timer, but the instant you move off, his timer will continue. And then it will, once he reaches the end of his timer, he'll, like Chica, compare. Remember, if it's lower, he'll succeed. If it's greater, then he'll fail it. And it helps on later nights to keep your camera on Freddy. Because even if your camera's down, Freddy can't move if your camera's down. And it helps a lot with later nights. It's called camera stalling. And the only way he can attack at 4B is if you leave his camera. If you leave his camera, is when he'll move to attack your door. He can leave while you're on cam 4B, but it's only when, I believe, Chica wants to go to 4B, because I believe Chica does override Freddy, I think. But anyways, now that we know how the animatronics work, I forgot to explain Foxy's door mechanic, which basically every time he knocks on the door, he drains more power. When Foxy first knocks, he'll drain 1%. When he knocks the second time, he'll drain 6. When he drains 3, I believe he drains 8. And then when he knocks a 4th time, I believe he drains 12, and it's so on and so on. That's why it gives incentive to watch him. Now that we talked about that, you would think by the end of night 5, which, by the way, night 4 and 5, the animatronics seem to move slower than remembered, because I remember them going a little bit faster. But you would think that at the end of night 5, that, well, you would get your paycheck and get to move on to a different game. Wrong. You get an extra overtime hours into night 6. And night 6 is a little bit harder. Then again, it took me like almost 6 tries to get night 5 done. Night 5 was a pain. Night 6 only took me like 2 tries. I'm not joking. And then you were thinking, with your overtime hours done, well, and it even says, see you there next week. What would be more to the game? Night 7, custom night, honestly kind of makes it worth going through the pain. Which is where you get 2 things. One, you get the max mode, and then you get 1987. Fun fact is that 1987, the code wasn't originally in the game. It got added to the game after, what is it? Oh, after rumors of putting 1987 will let you view the kitchen camera, Scott found this rumor and decided to troll everybody with it and make Golden Freddy jump scare you. And here's a fact about the 420 mode, is that upon beating 420 in original copies, it wouldn't give you a star because Scott Cawthon didn't know 420 was actually possible until, I believe, Markiplier beat it, because I believe he was the first player to beat 420. And Scott Cawthon found that it was actually possible, so he added third stars in for later copies. And I've beaten 420 in the main game and Night 6 twice. Once 2 years ago, and again for this very video for the gameplay that you're watching right now. And Night 7 wasn't actually that hard. The only reason I died on the first attempt was because I accidentally got my door jammed by Chica because I accidentally pulled my monitor up when she first got there, and when I pulled it down, I went straight to close it, and she already jammed it. But here's a little fact. When opening your cameras, when you see the white static, that's when your camera's physically on. And you can close your cameras after that. That's a strategy for 420. Because Foxy will reset his timer upon the white static being there. And if you're doing things right, you'll never ever see Foxy on your run for 420. I know that every time that I've played 420, I've never had to deal with Foxy because, well, the strat that I use. Anyways, the strat for 420 is basically either light camera, or you can do light camera light. And there should be some times where you can, well, try to not use power, but just check on Freddy, like by opening the camera. Anyways, why do I think that this game still holds up 11 years later? Well, as a fan since FNAF 2 to 3 era, I think this game still holds up because, well, the creepiness factor is still there. I mean, FNAF 1 and 6 are definitely the scariest out of their respective games, and honestly, the whole franchise. The reason what makes FNAF 1 so great is because FNAF 1, you have one continuous strategy that may or may not work. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. Sometimes RNG gets bad. And also, one playthrough is never the same from the other playthrough. And honestly, the first game is pretty big on audio cues and red herrings. And it's one of the only games, I think in my opinion, that incentivizes looking at the cameras. Or looking to see what's at the cameras. Considering, well, we already know what happens in later games. But, I mean, besides later nights when you figure out, oh, I don't have to be looking at the cameras, and to be doing this, I just go to one camera. But in my opinion, the gameplay loop is pretty fun. It's a pretty long game overall, with it being 8 minutes per night. Something that would go down in other games like FNAF 2 and 3 and 4 and the rest of them. Actually, 4 was the last one. No, Sister Location was the last one with the clock, technically, but in the main game, FNAF 4 was the last one with the clock. But I think FNAF 1 still holds up. One, the atmosphere is amazing with the music. And the game. What else? Still holds up. The characters, honestly, they've aged pretty well. Honestly, my favorite is Bonnie. That's my favorite character. And I like specifically his Withered Bonnie variant. Bonnie's always been my favorite. But Foxy's the second favorite, and Freddy's my third. Honestly, but the most creepiest, but they're all pretty creepy. The most creepiest is actually, it's Bonnie and Freddy. Those are the creepiest. Because Freddy's actually, the way that he's planted in the pizzeria is actually very well designed. Unlike the main three, where you can automatically see him in the cameras, Freddy, if he gets off the show stage, you have to find him. He's pretty hard to spot too, which is actually pretty great design. Like, for example, dining area. You have to look pretty hard within the dining area to see that Freddy's there. Same again with the bathrooms. East hallway. But the only thing I will say is East hall, corner, and kitchen. It's pretty easy to tell when he's there. Because the kitchen will give you an audio clue, and East hall, corner, you can tell because that's where he takes center stage. As for Bonnie, he is the creepiest, especially when he's in the backstage or in the hallway. Chica I've never found the creepiest or creepy at all. And Foxy, well, I barely had to deal with Foxy. But the atmosphere holds up. The characters age pretty well and are still pretty creepy. The ambience for the atmosphere is pretty good too. And I'd say this is a pretty solid gameplay loop of this game. Nothing more, nothing less. It's pretty solid. And something that the other FNAF games will have to learn from this is a solid gameplay loop. But yeah, that's why I think that this game still holds up in the big 2025. Again, I'm going to say this again, is that in the Discord server, we're going to vote between Sonic 3 Knuckles and Five Nights at Freddy's 2, whatever one you want to see next. But in the meantime, like, subscribe, and don't forget, never stay up past 4:45 a.m. See you later, and good night.